focusing in on the rail. Today on Spotlight Now, we talk to leaders leaders from HART, as well as talk to city officials of the integration of Phase 2 of the Honolulu skyline. Spotlight Now starts now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suchi and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Hello, and thanks for tuning in here to Spotlight Now on Hawaii News Now. Yunji Denise has the day off, and so we will be continuing in our conversation about HART. We have had this discussion about the state of the project and its delivery over to the city and county of Honolulu. We're going to be focusing in and talking to both HART officials as well as officials from the city and county of Honolulu. As always, we want to encourage those of you who are watching both on air and online to engage in the conversation. Enter your questions and comments for our guests in the Facebook comments section of our Facebook page at Hawaii News Now. Now, I want to welcome in my first two guests joining us from HART. We have Mike O'Keefe, the HART Deputy Executive Director, as well as Vance Tsuda, the HART Project Director. Thank you so much for joining me and for being here.
Thanks for having us.
You know, we have a lot of questions that we want to get to, as this is almost 2 years now since Skyline has been launched, and we're going to be talking to the city and county officials about just the integration efforts. But let's start off with where things are at now. Vance, I want to start off with you and talking about where the project is currently as Phase 2 is getting ready to open up, which will include some major and important stops.
Yeah, so segment 2, all the civil construction is complete. Right now we're going through testing, rigorous testing phases to prove the system and make sure it's safe for passengers to ride. Something similar we did with segment 1, running individual tests, integrated tests, and then what we're coming up on currently early July will be trial operations. So we'll run the system as if it was, in operations. We have scenarios that we'll run, regular service scenarios, emergency scenarios, contingency scenarios that need to be tested to make sure the system operates properly. Once that's completed, hopefully end of July timeframe, then we'll start our system service availability demonstration. So basically for a 30-day rolling period, Hitachi, the contractor responsible for operating and maintaining the system, has to meet a 98.5% availability in order to go into revenue service. All during that time, we're going to certify the system with our safety department, state safety oversight, HDOT, certify, make sure everything's safe before we turn it over to DTS for our opening expected in October 1st of this year.
And just to kind of clarify on just this transition and integration, the unique thing as compared to the first time is you were starting from ground zero. Now there's actually an integration with an already existing line. How does that dynamic work when you are continuing to service a segment of the rail that's currently operational, but adding in this entire second operation? I imagine that integration is going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, definitely. Segment 1, we had free will to test whenever we wanted. We didn't have passengers on the system. Now with passengers on the system, we need to make sure they're safe. They're going to ride through segment 1, get off at Aloha Stadium Station. All the passengers will come off the trains. The trains will move on to segment 2. Trains will do their run through segment 2, come back to Aloha Stadium. Passengers will get back on, and the train will move on. Challenge there, we have to calculate that 98.5% throughout the entire alignment, segment 1 and 2, while still calculating just segment 1 for Hitachi to meet their O&M requirements.
Mike, I want to bring you in here. You are fairly new to the position, 2 months in here as the deputy director, being brought over from the city and county yourself, having worked with Lori Kahikina. Just a personal question for you based on your 2 months here. What has your experience been like trying to catch up and learn about this project? And maybe what has surprised you the most as you enter this important transition phase for segment 2 opening up?
Yeah, so I've been telling folks it's a really exciting time to come onto the project. We really have a solid team at HART. It's really, refreshing and reaffirming to see, that the segment 2 opening later on this year is a really exciting time. And then, I think we have information out there about how we're progressing very quickly on construction for segment 3. the next segment that's going to take the line all the way into city center, so right into Kaka'ako.
Yeah, let's stay there and talk a little bit more about that, because as you are preparing to open up this new section that goes into Middle Street, simultaneously there's work that's going to be done in Iwalei and beyond. What can people who live and work in the downtown city center corridor expect in the next few months?
Yeah, so the big thing, again, is segment 2 opening in October, but concurrently, the progress on segment 3. So in August of this year, there's going to be some civil work being done in the Iwalei area. And then shortly after that, before the end of the year, folks will start to see columns come out of the ground in Iwalei and continuing through all the way into Halekuila eventually. And then, the system, segment 3, is really going to start to take shape in urban Honolulu. It's going to be really, really exciting to see.
Let's talk a little bit about just where things are at in Kalihi. We know that there has always been a few, just some roadblocks and just some obstacles that you folks have had to overcome with the realignment and just some of the electrical situations that are happening there. What has been some of the developments in that area, as we know that this Kalihi area has been a challenge? Are things still on the timeline that you expected, and how are you guys preparing for continuing on in this important corridor?
Yeah, we continue to maintain our schedule, and as you mentioned, very challenging area. All that utilities above head, all the HECO lines, the communication lines, that all needs to be put underground to make space for the guideway columns and the stations that are going to be built. If you look underground and you could see all the utilities, it's a spaghetti down there, as Lori had mentioned before, and we have to make space for all those utilities overhead and put them underground. Every day we go and open up a trench or start digging, we find utilities that aren't supposed to be there, or somewhere where it was supposed to be but it's not. So working with the utility companies, our contractors, our designers to accommodate some of those changes that need to occur within a day has been tough and challenging. We do have a challenging task ahead of us with the HECO lines. There's 138 kV lines that need to be underground. We're going through the process of putting all the infrastructure in. We're going to pull the cables, but even shutting down those lines, it's a coordination between us and HECO, and making sure that all the customers are still serviced. That's our biggest challenge coming up here towards the end of the year. And then eventually all those big 138 kV cables and poles are going to come down. You'll see less overhead lines, and everything will be underground.
And what is the expectation going into, say, the downtown area? Do you anticipate that being very similar to what we're seeing in Kalihi? Because that will be the next area, but I imagine that it might be the same infrastructure you're dealing with.
Yeah, in the downtown area, there's not so much overhead lines. We did still need to move some utilities underground to make space for those columns. But overall, some of the traffic control that you see in downtown Dillingham will generally stay the same throughout the entire year. Going into next year, there may be some changes, but we try to maintain one direction of traffic flow in either direction. And that's kind of typically what we'll see once the civil contractor will start.
One of the things that we also saw happen with this project is that it was almost referred to as it was leapfrogged over some of the Kalihi areas as the construction begins now moving into the heart of Kaka'ako and downtown area. Some of the businesses were maybe not expecting this to happen this quickly, and there was some pushback, and we actually had a story that aired here on Hawaii News Now a few weeks ago about some of the concerns that some of these businesses were saying that they were kind of expecting it to follow along the lines of Kalihi going through town and then coming to them, but because there were some of the delays, the project has decided to move forward. If you can speak to addressing some of the concerns by the businesses who are still in areas that HART is looking to take over, how is that communication going with those businesses that are being impacted by what is to come?
Yeah, we continue to coordinate with those businesses and let them know our project schedule, up to date as to what's occurring next month and the month after, when we expect to really be in front of their businesses. Some of the property owners, what we try to do is coordinate with them station designs and trying not to preclude any future development. The station itself, Having passengers get on and off at that location would be ideal for other development, whether it's TLD or, small businesses, shopping, whatever it may be. We try to work with those property owners and those businesses to integrate well into that. And that's the whole plan, and the idea is that TLD and these businesses all intermingle with the station.
One of those businesses that kind of pushed back was actually the landowner of Pacific Guardian Tower in downtown, and one of their concerns is that they didn't want people coming through their property in the downtown area, and receiving some pushback. How do you address those types of situations when there is a direct landowner who is saying, we don't want this, and knowing that this is an important segment of the rail, having to find ways to find common ground and work together on this?
Yeah, we try to do our best to do everything that's right for the public. And in some cases, such as Pacific Guardian Center, they don't want any of our passengers flowing into their property. And, we respect that. So we're going to design the station such that passengers will get out, they'll get out onto Nimitz area and then, go around the building into the downtown area. Things that we'll do with the station, not to preclude, just in case in the future they want to, put something in there within the station or integrate with the station. There's a possibility of that. But, respecting their wishes, we're designing the station such that passengers won't flow in that area.
Mike, I want to ask you, there has been some criticism thus far of what the ridership looks like right now with rail only going, of course, to Aloha Stadium. And there has been a lot of anticipation about this next segment. How much of an impact do you think the opening of this next segment will have an impact on ridership overall for the Skyline?
Yeah, we think it'll be huge, Ryan. It's going to, so the next segment consists of 4 stations, approximately 5 miles. And it'll go to the Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam. It'll go to the airport. Pearl Harbor, obviously a very big employment center for Oahu. The airport, also a big employment center, but also obviously you have a lot of tourists coming in and out of the airport every day. And so that'll be huge. We think it'll significantly increase ridership, along with what I think John from DTS will talk about in the following segment along how the city's Department of Transportation Services is going to do a lot of work to integrate the bus schedule and system to work seamlessly with the trains on the new segment.
Yeah, and I also want to add, obviously, we normally have Lori Kahikina here on the program. She was not able to make it, and so we're just as thankful to have both of you on as well. But I do want to talk a little bit about Lori Kahikina and her role as the executive director. She has had sort of a rough time in the last year, facing some criticism from members of the HART board. Ultimately, there was a decision made. The mayor also coming to Kahikina's defense. And so I just want to get your thoughts on how things are going right now within the organization of HART. There were obviously some questions about vacancies and positions, you filling one of them. But how overall is the infrastructure doing within the department? How are people reacting to some of the decisions that are being made, and just overall the morale there at HART?
And the morale is really good. I came in to HART about 2.5 months ago now with some of the same questions. I've known Lori for a long time and have worked with her for a long time. So I know, although there were these questions, I knew that, Lori's going to run a tight ship. And I got in there, and that's true to form. We have a great team at HART. Led by Vance, who's the project director, and morale is high. We have a lot of fun doing. We work hard and we have a lot of fun. It's a great place to work, and like I said, it's an exciting time to be part of the project with everything that's happening.
Vance, any thoughts from you? You've been with this project for some time now, and seeing it go through multiple leaderships. How would you describe the state of HART right now?
I think the program is at its best as it's ever been. With Lori's leadership, the direction that she's given, everything, that we are doing for the city and for the people of Honolulu, she brings that, and we all follow that. Morale is great. The staff and employees, we all, like Mike said, have fun. We had, events for the city staff, all of our staff to kind of, relax a little bit sometimes. We have monthly, potlucks and luncheons where we can all sit down and just talk story and, not talk so much about work and the project and, really get to know everyone.
I want to also bring up one of the concerns that this project has faced time and time again, of course, is funding and how this thing moves forward. There has been some opposition, or questions, I should say, not opposition, by Senator Brenton Awa, who posted something online on a recent trip to Washington, D.C., where he said that he went to the Department of Transportation to ask officials to look into this project and to see how money was being spent, and questioned some of the things that are happening there. I want to ask you, Mike, did you know about this meeting that supposedly happened in Washington, D.C., and any concerns that you may have about what we're seeing coming out of Washington, D.C. and potential federal cuts for this program?
So we did not know about the meeting before it happened, but we did find out about it later through social media, and so I'm not completely sure what to make of it. I think it's great that he wants to make sure that we're spending money the way it's supposed to be spent on this project, and I can assure him and everyone that we are. We have a really good relationship with our federal partners on this project. We meet with them at least once a month, sometimes more frequently depending on what's going on. And so there's an open line of communication. There's a free flow of information. And we have no indication so far, despite some uncertainty in Washington, we have no indication at all that the remainder of the federal funding for this project is in jeopardy. In fact, we've been reassured that we're pretty good to go.
And just to bring people up to speed, because it has been a long project overall, but can you just update us on what that looks like, when these fundings will be released, and how much more money is expected to come in for this project to reach these milestones? Sure.
So in total, we have about a little over $1.5 billion in federal funding. We've received the majority of that so far, but there's a couple of more milestones left, funding milestones left for the project. So the first one that we're going to experience is later this year when we open segment 2. We're in line to receive another $125 million in federal funds. The next federal funding milestone is going to come summer of 2026 when we complete the utility relocation project that Vance was talking about. And then the third and final milestone, there's going to be $119 million remaining in federal funds at that point, and that's due to HART in 2027.
Given where we're at with the economy, and when we're looking at funding that is also being generated here within, the GET and TET, and the state's just overall revised economic forecast as we look ahead, are you concerned at all? Is there any concern about what could potentially happen with the funding for this project, and what are some of the things that you're looking to do in case, projections don't map out?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I can say for right now, so first of all, the majority of our project is funded by the GET and the TAT from the state, and we're very thankful for that. As of right now, our revenue from those funding sources is on track, so we're good. If it were at all to start to dip below projections, that would probably lead us to need to borrow money to fill in those gaps, and that would be either in the form of issuing bonds, general obligation bonds through the city to pay for construction costs, or there's a short-term loan that's called a tax exempt commercial paper, which is just another a short-term loan. So we have that. We have borrowing money in our back pocket to do to bridge any shortfalls in funding, but so far it's not looking like we're going to have to do that.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about just some of the design elements that we can expect in this second phase. You guys are also going to be hosting neighborhood design workshops within the community. If you can tell us more about that, about how the community's voice will be incorporated into the design elements, into specifically some of the stations and things that we can expect to see in phase 2.
Yeah, so these are for the stations in segment 3. what we have to do is go out to the neighborhood and get their input on station designs. And our first workshop is scheduled for the end of this month, the 26th. We will be previewing the Chinatown station. And what we're looking for is the community's feedback on the look and feel of the station, kind of, how it fits into the community. That specific station is located next to historical properties. So we want to make sure we incorporate the station within that historical property, and we don't take away from the historical properties. So, things like the color of the station, plantings of the plants or greenery around the station, potentially, some of the architectural features of the station. That's the kind of input that we'll be looking for from the neighborhood and the public.
And just overall, when you look at where things have gone, and as someone who's been on the project for some time now, what are some of the lessons that you've learned from developing the first segment, and as you look to plan this final third segment now, that you've had to adjust? I mean, we've heard stories about, I never thought we'd be talking about frogs, using the term frogs with a rail project, but we know that was an issue in the past. We know that there was some concrete issues as well. What are some of the adjustments that have been made over time so that, those maybe things that happened that were issues in segment one are being addressed this time around?
Yeah, we're taking everything that we learned from segment one and segment two and kind of putting that in a package and discussing with the contractor. And we've got a very experienced contractor with Tudor Perini. They build a lot of systems throughout the mainland. And it's more of a not so much a prescriptive contract where we're telling them, we need canopies or we need certain types of material or certain types of finishes. We're giving them kind of the opportunity to propose things to us that, they see that works in other systems. We have alternative technical concepts that we're using where, if they want to change the design of the guideway, let's say, they have that ability to propose a change to that. So, the guideway may look different from segment 2 and segment 1 throughout segment 3. Something more that looks traditional to a bridge or some of the highways that we have, like Nimitz Highway. So they have the ability to propose those type of things, and we're going to work with our partners such as DTS to whether we accept or maybe we'll take portions of that. Some of the other things like the canopy on the west side, segment 1 and 2, we have the tensile fabric canopies. Very expensive, very difficult to build, very difficult to maintain. So the CCGS contractor, they have the ability to propose more traditional metal type roofing, something that you'd see on normal buildings. That'll be easier to build, easier to maintain. We want to make sure that we're giving the best product to DTS, not just visually, but also for the lifetime of the project.
Mike, as we focus in on where things stand and where it's going, right? Specifically going to City Center in Kaka'ako, the plan for many years was to go to Ala Moana Center. And when we've had Laurie Kahikina on this program in the past, she says that that's still ultimately what the goal is, to get to Ala Moana and then maybe beyond to the University of Hawaii, if at all possible. How much of that is considered in any of the discussions, the plannings, knowing that there could be a continuation, that yes, Kaka'ako for now is the finish line, but there could be an extension? And how much of that goes into planning, integration, conversations, budgeting, knowing that the ultimate goal may be a little bit further?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. It's the short answer. It's a big part of the conversation right now. We are intent on getting the system to Ala Moana as a next step. There's also been some discussion about extending the system in Kapolei further west. It's in East, it ends in East Kapolei right now, and perhaps going further into Kapolei is on the table as well. But we want to extend the system in both directions. And in order to do that, there has to be a lot of studies, a lot of plans, and so we're undertaking those now. Taking a step back from when segment 3, the segment that's currently under construction, is going to be finished in 2030, 2031 for service. That's not too far away, and it takes a lot of work to plan and design for any of these segments. So really, we need to start now on the planning for the next segment in order to be able to hit the ground running with construction as soon as construction on segment 3 ends. I mentioned earlier, Ryan, about how we have such a great team at HART right now, and so we want to make sure that we don't lose any of that team in case there's a lull between construction in segment 3 and construction in segment 4. So we're very aware of that, and we want to make sure that we plan and organize accordingly so that we can pick up with the next segment, wherever that is, East Kapolei or to Ala Moana Center, but just to pick up with that right when we're done building segment 3.
And what do you think is the priority when you start planning that? I would think it'd have to be funding. Is that where things start off, and trying to work with policymakers, lawmakers about this potential? How do you begin those conversations to look beyond Kakako?
Yeah, it's a huge part. Funding is a huge part of it, and we're having those conversations now at the state and the city level, and so figuring out how to pay for the extension is a big part of it. Maybe through a GTTAT extension, perhaps that's one option, but also working with the local metropolitan planning organization to study it, and then later on see what sort of federal funding we can get for this project as well.
Vance, as we sort of wrap up this conversation, I do want to kind of go back to where we started about this opening of segment 2 and what people can expect coming up in a few months. You mentioned some of the testing, but what are the other things that people can expect to see in the next few months before this is officially targeted for October?
Yeah, and as soon as, ending of this week, early next week, we could potentially see trains up on segment 2 during the day. The plan is to take some trains out there, run them between Pearl Harbor Station and Middle Street Station, just to put some mileage up there. And the system learns as it, runs, so it'll be beneficial in the long run when we start doing the system demonstration. So as early as, next week, we could see trains during the day. Once we go into trial run, which is in a couple of weeks, we'll definitely see the trains go into segment 2. Passengers will be riding segment 1, like I said earlier. They'll get off at Aloha Stadium, train will move on, go to segment 2, come back to Aloha Stadium, passengers will get back on. There's going to be announcements, there'll be staff within the stations to make sure that the passengers do get off the train. We can't allow any passengers onto segment 2 until it's safety certified. So that's the kind of changes you'll see within the system. The system will stay at the current schedule in terms of what time they open and what time they close, but you'll see more activity within segment 2.
And this may seem like a naive question, but when I imagine and you look at the way that the rail is running and Skyline is running, it will end at Middle Street. And how do the routes get impacted and changed overall? So the ridership that currently exists now that goes to Aloha Stadium, maybe people are used to a shorter route. Now this is going to, I'm assuming, extend sort of the line. How do you manage just the orchestration of some of the existing routes into this new route that will take it to Middle Street? And how does that all integrate into each other with it going back out to Kapolei and then moving back into town?
Yeah, so right now, segment 1, there's 5 trains that run during revenue service. There's 2 spare trains just in case there's any issues with one of those trains that are running. And right now, the trains arrive at every 10-minute intervals at every station. You can expect to see the same once we go into segment 2. There's going to be 7 trains that are being used for revenue service in segment 1 and 2 with 2 spare trains. So not much change in terms of wait time at the station. You can still expect the trains to arrive every 10 minutes. Just at Aloha Stadium, you'll see the train go on to segment 2 and come back.
Right. As we wrap up here, Mike, I want to ask you, this is a project, obviously, that has received much criticism, has taken a lot of time to get done. There has been frustration that has been felt by members of this community and many people who are outspoken, some online, as well as we see the comments coming in today about just the amount of money, time, and effort that has been placed into this. As someone who represents this body and this project, what would you say is the message to those who are still frustrated about what's being done here, and why do you continue to advocate for this project?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. That's a tough one, but an important question. I mean, I personally believe in the project. I believe in public transportation, and I believe in this project specifically, which is why I came to work for the project and for Lori. I think as the project progresses, as we move into downtown and then eventually through to city center by the end of the decade, it's going to be a highly accessible and highly usable system, and the community is going to benefit from it, not only from getting from point A to point B, but the city has tremendous plans for transit-oriented development in and around the stations, and it's going to be an economic driver. It's going to be a convenient transportation option for people. It's going to mean a lot for people on this island.
And it's a question for you, and as someone who's been working on this project too, what is your message to those who criticize or are skeptical of this project?
I agree with all the points Mike brought up, and to emphasize on the benefits once the project is complete, or once we get to Kakako, that development around the stations, and talking to some of those property owners, their vision for what it could be in the future once the station is operational and people are using the system. Not just the property itself that's adjacent to it, but the community around. Being able to revitalize that community and make it more active, whether it's small businesses or TOD development, housing, whatever it may be, the station is where that can start and grow its way around it.
All right, well, Michael Keith, Vance Tsuda, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. We know that there's a lot going over there at HART, and we appreciate you taking time to update us on everything that's happening. Coming up after this break, we're going to catch up with Deputy Director from the City and County Transportation Services to talk about the integration of the second phase and how they plan to integrate this new exciting moment for Skyline. Stay tuned. We'll be right back right after this. Welcome back to Spotlight Now as we continue our conversation about the Honolulu skyline and some of the developments that are happening with the rail. Joining us now is Jon Nouchi, the Deputy Director of Transportation Services for the City and County of Honolulu. John, you heard our discussion that we had earlier with the two leadership officials from HART talking about this next phase. This has got to be an exciting time for the city as you sort of get the keys to this next segment. How much of a game changer do you think this is going to make for the project?
This is going to be a huge step for the project, and it's not the ultimate step for the project, but it is a huge step. It's like going from like childhood into adolescence here. We're really looking forward to it. We are keenly focused on that first operations date of October 1st of this year, to the point where I know it's 106 days left and 105 if we're talking about when we're going to celebrate the opening. But it's all systems go right now. Everybody's doing exactly what they need to do. Things appear pretty smooth right now.
Let's talk about the importance of the airport station itself and what you expect that to do for ridership, as well as just the integration that it has to go within the Department of Transportation from the state level. What are some of the steps being taken there to make people aware about this important portion of the project being open?
In the last, we have 100 days or so, right? So we're kind of in that red zone, and I know I'm probably going to say the same thing when we're 1 week out. But we are coordinating extensively with our partners at the State Department of Transportation, with our good friend Ed Sniffen there and his staff at the Honolulu Daniel K. Inouye International Airport. And part of that is kind of filling in the last pieces. The station is there, all the infrastructure is there. We've been doing tours with different stakeholder groups to have them better understand how it coordinates with the rest of the airport. But most importantly, I think now that the hard infrastructure is there, we're there to focus on the people. We are sharing that responsibility with the airports. They're going to help people navigate from the station to their appropriate terminal. It's conveniently situated, I guess, right across from the customs area. So if you come out of the station on the concourse level, imagine you go right towards Inter-Island, you go straight towards, the one part of Terminal 2, and then a little bit further for the Diamond Head side of Terminal 2. So we are working on doing good wayfinding from the baggage claim into the station, so we know how to get people to the station. That airport segment is very important. That airport station is very important, not only because of Skyline, but when we open Skyline on that October 1st, we're going to be putting in a lot of bus service that connects there. And we'll have our new W line, which is a rapid express bus from airport to Waikiki. So we have a lot of Skyline for our local residents who want to go west, and we have a lot of rapid bus landlines for everyone who's trying to get to Waikiki.
And so if I'm just looking at the route, right, and thinking about it, if I'm coming off from or coming out of the airport and trying to use Skyline, it would make most sense for those going west, right? Because for those going east, you're only going to go a few more stops that will get you to Middle Street. Are you encouraging those who are going maybe into Waikiki to maybe not necessarily, Skyline might not be the route for you just yet? You're still going to encourage people to use other forms of public transportation beyond Skyline at that point?
Oh, absolutely. And that's why we're anchoring our W line Waikiki Express at the Lelepaua Daniel K. Inouye Skyline Station, so that we navigate everybody to that point. Everybody using Skyline headed west can hop on Skyline, and everybody can hop on the W line headed to Waikiki. So I gotta say, I take a lot of pride and pleasure in the fact that we are delivering this improvement for our local residents first, that everybody will navigate however they will to that station, and we have this high quality frequent Skyline to take everyone west, but we also will have a bus that goes east every 10 minutes, same frequency as Skyline, makes very few stops on the way to Waikiki.
This end of this month will mark another milestone. It'll be 2 years since the project and Skyline opened up for the public. What have you learned in the last 2 years about ridership, about now that you have data and you can examine numbers and demographics of people and what stops are more, popular than others, what have you learned from the data gathered in the last 2 years?
So you bring up a super interesting point. As of June 30th, we're going to be exactly 2 years from our opening. And that is a huge combination of Skyline being, time goes by too quickly, but in some ways not quickly enough. So we're really excited to deliver this 5-mile 4-station extension. What we've learned about the first station, and not that we've learned this, but when we chose to open this in a very strategic conversation with Mayor and HART and our DTS administration, we saw the value in opening the system for the first almost 11 miles and 9 stations. And not because we knew it would be we would have a ridership boom, but because we wanted people to get to know the system. And we wanted to make sure that we could kind of flex our arms a little bit and make sure that we knew how to operate a safe and efficient system. And to that end, we've learned a lot about that. We've operated the system at a exceeding 99.8% availability. And that's for all trips, for being on time, for having every little minuscule detail be in place. But we've also seen the ridership grow slightly since we started. I think our ridership now is probably hovering about 1,000 more on average than we did when we first opened. We can kind of see the ebbs and flows of the school, the university ridership. We think that now we're doing maybe about 3,500 average during the summer, whereas we're doing maybe about 4,000 average on a regular weekday when school was in session. And that's probably has to do with the fact that we have 2 stations that are directly anchored to UH system campuses, UH West Oahu and Leeward Community College.
One of the things that also came out in the last few months was a report from the city auditor that actually brought up a number of things actually that were of concern, including the commute times that it takes for riders coming in from the west side using Skyline, saying that in times that the ride time was actually longer than riding a bus or driving in a car. There was also a number of other things that were brought up during this audit. What have you learned from that? What adjustments have been made since that report was released?
So we really worked in concert with the city auditor and their team to help them deliver all the data that they needed to do this audit. And the product that came out, we did take some exceptions to, and we had a lot of comments for that. I think we turned back about 72 comments to the city auditor. And it was more to focus on disputing, I guess, some of the methodologies of how they conducted some things. But in the end, a lot of productive comments came out of the audit. And some of those, it's one of the most gratifying things when someone suggests something to you that you've already started to do, such as accepting more payments, such as credit cards and app-based payment from mobile phones. And we already have that in place, and we hope to release that within maybe 6 to 8 months, that you'll just be able to tap on using a credit card or a debit card or a mobile wallet on your phone, and instead of have to have a whole card. But some of the things that we did disagree with is this audit was supposed to have captured the first year operations or the first 6 months of operations for Skyline. And we didn't necessarily think it was fair to do time travel comparisons on Skyline when the system is a well-defined 10.8 miles. And understanding that you would still have to catch a bus on both sides, that's not so much a direct audit of the operations quality of Skyline, because as I shared earlier, Skyline is operating very on time and very reliably, and which they did say. But to judge the travel time based on other things like traffic outside of the Skyline corridor, we didn't think was a fair comparison.
What do you anticipate with this next segment opening up in terms of just commute time? How much of that will be improved now that you have a longer segment that's getting you closer into town? Yeah,
I think one of the things we're most excited about is the fact that the Skyline operations, the length of Skyline going to maybe about 16 miles or so, that length immediately parallels the H1 freeway. And I think once we see that you can express yourselves through that corridor, but while making stops, I think the consistency of travel time in that corridor will be an attractor to people. And we just have to encourage people to come out and try it and give them a reason to get out and try that. And people always accuse me of trying to get people out of their cars. And really, that's not where I'm at. I want people to use Skyline for the part of their commute that is the most onerous. Instead of slogging it out in stop-and-go traffic all the way through the H1, maybe you can leave your car on one side or the other and still do what you need to do.
Talk to us a little bit of what that station at Middle Street will look like, because I imagine there are going to be people who want to go into various different routes, and the coordination with and the integration into the bus service is going to have to be more than it already is now. What are some of those steps looking like? Is that area big enough for the demand of what that needs to be for the time being until this third segment is done?
Yeah, actually, let me talk through a little bit about how that's going to work. So the interface between Skyline and the bus system, when people come in on the new segment to Skyline, if they're going anywhere beyond Kalihi, like downtown, Ala Moana, Kaka'ako, UH Manoa, they will make their transfer not at the Kalihi Transit Center at the end of the line, but one station prior at the Lagoon Drive, the Ahua Lagoon Drive station. And the reason for that is it's a far more elegant transfer between Skyline and bus. It's a very low station, so you walk down one or come down, 1 story's worth, and you go right out to a bus connection, like less than 100 feet away. From there, the bus can actually go on any travel corridor. You can go directly onto H1 freeway to get into town. You can go on Nimitz Highway to get into Waikiki. And so we're going to do the more regional connections there. The Kalihi Transit Center is a very transit dense. It's a really great gateway to all the neighborhoods in Kalihi and beyond, so maybe between Kalihi and downtown. So if you're doing anything in that Dillingham-Kalihi corridor, of which there's a lot of transit activity and a lot of stuff to do there, you would use Kalihi Transit Center. But if you're going to go to downtown and east of that, then you'd make your connection at Lagoon Drive.
And so just educating the public, I imagine, and just getting the word about that will take some efforts. I mean, what is going to be done so people know exactly what stop to get off of, what bus route, and what are, I just got back from New York City where it's, you just put it in Google Maps and everything is very easy, self-explanatory in that regard. Is that something that, the city is looking to do to really make things this seamless?
Absolutely. So we know that we have a very diverse group of riders. We have kupuna, we have, regular adult riders, and we have students and youth that ride it. We're trying to do a marketing push and a communications push that actually kind of meets everybody where they're at. So we're doing the traditional print, we will be doing social media, and we're doing a digital app integration. So we've recently partnered, we have a new app in town to help people navigate, and that's called the Transit app, both available on iOS and Android. And, using all of those tools, we hope to communicate the best, easiest, and most efficient, fastest way to make your commute happen.
Are there any specific projections that you guys are looking for or benchmarks that you are trying to achieve with this second segment to be able to deem this as this is successful, we've kind of hit our mark? How are you measuring the success in terms of ridership and getting people where they need to be and really promoting this as a form of transportation with this next segment?
I think we almost made the mistake of looking at what, in the first segment, we looked at how much ridership we had in that exact 10.8 mile corridor. And we kind of projected from there, but that was a pre-pandemic projection. So in this case, we hope to, with the addition of this next 5 miles and 4 stations, given that we're going through the airport, of course, but also 2 out of the 3 largest job centers, if it's incumbent on us to actually go and pound the pavement to make sure that the shipyard knows, the Joint Base Pearl Harbor knows, the airports, and all of their trickle down, the airlines, the State Department of Transportation workers, the catering, all those people that do airport services, and also in the airport industrial area and in what I like to call West Honolulu or West Kalihi, that we get out there and we let them know that this service is coming to them. With that said, though, I think we'd like to at least see our ridership double for that. We anticipate that there is an opportunity here for people maybe who say they're not going to use it every day. If they use it to go to the airport when they go to the airport, that's a valuable thing, and it starts to maybe change people's perception about how they might use transit in this town.
Is there anything specific that you have learned or was maybe an unexpected challenge for you folks when you took over the keys for the first segment, and maybe something that you are looking to improve on for the second segment in terms of ridership or whatever it may be, the guest experience? What, I guess, are some of the challenges that you experienced and some of the things learned that are assisting in this new segment?
I think one of the things we want to improve on is our communication with our passengers. Not only the ones that we have, but the ones that we don't have. And that's why we're going to be making a push to make sure that everybody knows about Skyline services. And while we're not doing a large scale, this extension of 5 miles is not as big as our initial opening where we waited like 55 years to have an operating rail segment. We do need to be better at making sure people know what options exist out there, and basically how do they even get on a bus or how do they get on Skyline. And I think everybody has a fond appreciation for the bus systems, part of how we grew up here, but it's about us reintroducing people back to the transit services that are not at all like the ones that they knew before. We're going to put in some really premium bus services to complement and connect to Skyline.
Just overall, beyond Skyline, the Department of Transportation Services does more than just this project. There's obviously a lot of things that you guys are also working on. I did want to just ask a little bit about, back to school is coming up in a few months. We talked to the superintendent who was here just about a month ago, who expressed some concern about, transportation of students to to school, and saying, doing a call out actually on the show to ask people to come in and become bus drivers. How much of that integration do you guys work with the DOE to maybe help alleviate some of the concerns that they might have about transporting, kids to school?
A lot of times, like, crisis and problems bear out great relationships and problem solving. And over the years, we've grown a great relationship with the Student Transportation Services Office of DOE. And we've also worked very closely with Superintendent Hayashi on figuring out where our transit services can overlap the resources that the school buses can deliver in terms of their manpower and stuff. So we really try to work together to integrate. Like, if they have a gap, we see if there's some way we can fill that with our services. We have to be very careful that we don't provide a school-based service because we're a federally funded enterprise. But, in that sense, we found ways to fill in some very noticeable gaps to just bring better opportunity to the Keiki. One of the examples is we will be starting a shuttle route out in Eva, like in far Eva, to the Iroquois Point area, so that the kids get another option to get to school early or to get to school late, outside of their school bus options. And that's so that they can participate in like before school or after school events. And so that kind of opportunity is really hand in hand with what we think transit should be providing.
And beyond that, and beyond Skyline, what are some of the other things that are on the priority list right now for you folks there at the Department of Transportation Services?
We are really investing a lot of federal monies into Safe Streets for All. And that's, in most of our communities, especially our older ones, there's not a lot of clear delineations of where sidewalks are or just safe paths for our keiki, especially our younger ones, to actually get to their schools. What's good for keiki is good for kupuna and good for everybody. So we're working on some programs to bring more enhanced sidewalks and paths and safer crossings and intersections to many neighborhoods across the island. And we think a lot of people would exercise the ability to walk to school. A lot of students would do that or bike to school if their parents felt that they would be safe doing so. So we're trying to kind of overcome those barriers and just create more opportunities for people to have a little bit more transportation freedom, so they don't always have to be expected to drive or be dropped off in a car.
One of the other projects that recently commuters have noticed is the changes that are happening on King Street and the addition of the bike lane. I mean, what can you tell us about the first? Has it been a month or 2 months now since that has gone on? Do you think drivers have sort of figured things out there? Because there seemed to be some confusion at times there as the city looks to continue to expand the efforts for bike opportunities for bike riders.
That one's tough. We know that anything that you put in our city center is going to be, any kind of change is hard. We go out consistently and we go and monitor the delay and things like that. What didn't help was we also started another construction project right following that after King and South, after the Alapa'i Street intersection, and that might have created more of a perception that the bike lane is causing a lot of that. But, we've found that not to be true. And while there is a slight increase in a bump in how much travel time it takes to get through, we have to weigh the value of when we install a complete street. And when we put the our partners at Department of Design and Construction put down those lanes, the demand was pent up that people started using it on bikes immediately. So we knew that there was some pent up demand to go that far. So we are all, moving forward on complete streets and transportation equity across our roadways.
We are almost out of time, but just want to give you a final message here for this second segment of Skyline and what your message is to riders out there.
If you didn't try it before, try it. It might go someplace now that you need to go. So, I mean, I love that it's summer, and when I ride Skyline now, I see people taking their kiki out for, summertime activities. But I always talk to them and say, hey, October 1st, we're going to make it to the airport, so try use it. And everybody's surprised about it, which only means to me that we need to be better at getting the word out. So, October 1st, 106 more days is all we have to get to that point of success, and we welcome everybody aboard October 1st.
Yeah, an exciting time for the Skyline indeed. All right, Jon Nouchi, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be right back right after this.
From the moment you wake up.
Hawaii News Now brings you the stories that impact your day.
With more on the breaking news, we go live to Casey Lund.
Ready with the push alert? I'm going live.
We have an update to the breaking news we brought you this morning on Sunrise.
Okay, guys, as soon as this wraps, toss to Mahia.
And we've been covering this story all day.
Now we go live to Mahia for a new development.
Stand by for breaking news. They just captured the suspect.
That's confirmed?
Yes, sources just confirmed it.
The news you need the moment it breaks.
Here on Hawaii News Now.
First alert traffic is like always having a helpful passenger right next to you.
There's a crash up ahead in the left lane.
When we see a backup, we'll tell you live on TV.
That doesn't look too good.
And send an alert to your phone.
I'll type, you drive.
First alert traffic on TV, streaming, and on the Hawaii News Now app.
Keeping you and your ohana safe.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei-Suchi. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders. And taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
We want to thank our guests for coming on here today, again, as we focus in on the Honolulu Rail Project and Skyline, talking to HART officials in the first half of the show about some of the milestones that are going to be taking place. We heard from the team that they are excited about this second phase that will be opening up in October as HART hands over the keys to the City and County of Honolulu's Department of Transportation Services and expect ridership to increase and overall visibility of the project. They talked about some of the challenges that continue to exist within the Kalihi corridor areas as they continue to work on some of the mitigation efforts there with some of the electrical lines and actually going and starting construction into the downtown area, which is considered in that phase 3 of the project. And an interesting note as well, saying that we can expect to see columns actually going up in the downtown and Iwilei area by the end of the year. And so there is a lot of excitement there. We want to thank you for tuning in. We'll see you right back here next week for another episode of Spot.